You know, usually when someone suggests to me to read a manga series, I kind of wait for a while. And the reason why I usually do that is because I really want to see what the reviews are going to say about the manga series. However, sometimes I have a tendency to wait a little bit too long, and that was definitely the case with Chainsaw Man. And today I'm making this video because now that Chainsaw Man has ended, unfortunately, at what I think to be way too soon. And definitely, I was happy to hear that it's going to have a part two because this series is just pretty amazing. And I just have to say, like, when I was done reading this manga series, and I know I haven't been following it that closely because I think I binge watched up to, or at least binged read up to at least, I think it was chapter 95. And I believe it just ended at chapter 97, and I read the last two chapters. And I haven't been posting it on my channel because I wasn't exactly too sure how far I was going to go along. And also, it just takes a whole lot of work to just explain it to all my viewers in one video how or why I haven't been reviewing a series that I've been reading for so long. But at the same time, I just have to realize, like, this series was really fire and it was very realistic. And what I mean by realistic is not in so much the material of the show. I mean, we have pretty much like chainsaw demons and all types of weird stuff going on in this manga series. But I love the fact that the artist was able to just relay to us, the audience, a realistic picture of just life and horrible circumstances that can happen. And this series really reminded me of this. And although it is considered a shonen series, at least that's what I believe. I may be wrong about that, by the way, because I know that it's in Shonen Jump, but I'm not necessarily sure if this is like a Shonen Jump series, like for instance Black Clover or Naruto or One Piece, just because of just the material that was in the series to begin with. I mean, it was very gritty, very realistic. And I would definitely say that comparable series would, of course, be Attack on Titan or Tokyo Ghoul. However, this series is super gritty. Just from Denji's origins, his parents had died. I believe his father was killed and his mother had died from a disease. And Denji has to live on his own and he works for the mob. And the only saving grace, the only bright light in his life is actually when he runs across this demon dog named Pucheta. And Pucheta is like his best friend. And even before that, Denji's life wasn't so great. I believe that he was also abused by his father. It just wasn't so good. And when he works for this mob killing demons with his demon dog Pucheta, he has to pay off a loan or a debt that his father did not pay off. And it is through the next couple of chapters that we see that Denji, we kind of like see his origin story. And this isn't exactly a video that's going to be summarizing the whole entire series all in one, because I assume if you guys are watching this video, you already know how the series goes and what things you may see in the series and how it ends and the storyline and all that. But I'm really going to be getting into just the intangible things. And what I mean by the intangible things, I mean like the character development, everything that we saw in this series and why I actually really came to love this series because of just of the gruesomeness. Even in this panel right here, we see that Denji, he met a super gruesome end, and it's because of his dog Pucheta that he's able to have this new life as the Chainsaw Man and is able to actually essentially have a new family with these three characters, or rather these two characters that we see right here. We see Power and Aki. And the one thing that I really have to say about this manga series when I was really going through it, man, I mean, it's just super sad because when we look at Denji's life, his life goes from essentially the most horrible thing that you can think of. And that's definitely not an overstatement. His mother died from a disease because of her medical bills. And obviously, you know, this really relates to our real world where people don't have health care, where people don't have the money to deal with these diseases. And unfortunately, there are parents and people and even children that die from this. And so Denji, he grows up in this system whereby, you know, he's just not winning. He doesn't even have enough money to get by, to just live. And on top of that, he has to pay off this debt of this medical bill. And because of that, he works for this mob. And it's through the dealings with the mob that he eventually dies and meets his end, because the mob looks at him as just expendable. He is just pretty much an insect in their world. And all Denji wants is just a better life. And that's the one main thing that I love about this series, is that it's like real. I mean, Denji had the worst life that you could possibly imagine for somebody. He's basically all alone. However, it is through his powers that he meets this new family in the form of Aki and Power, as I've said before. But even that doesn't really last long. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later in the video when I especially talk about like just the sad deaths that we really see in this series. But just to look at Denji's character, he latches on to affection pretty well. And we saw this I guess that we can kind of see this with Makima, and I kind of want to be careful what I say because, I know that people like Makima as a character. And if you guys don't know who Makima is, she's actually the leader of this demon hunter group, and it's like a government organization that works for Japan. However, it is like worldwide. Different governments have their own form of demon hunters, and it goes super, super, super in depth. I mean, I'm probably going to do like another video on it because it's pretty awesome just to see like the different groups and organizations. But the reason why Denji really just was so attached to Makima was she was like the first one to show him affection in such like a long time. And you really see her manipulate him at every single end. And one of the saddest parts in the series is when Denji comes to the realization that Makima never really liked him for him, and this actually led to him defeating her. And he pretty much explains this when he talks to another one of the demon hunters, because he asks, like, how did you get the drop on her? She seemed untouchable. And Denji said that he made this whole entire observation of Makima that she can only recognize somebody by their scent. She couldn't recognize people by their faces because she always just forgot. And maybe that was by her choice, that she didn't really seem to think that people's faces were significant enough to actually remember them. And so Denji, he said that he made a gamble. He says, well, look, if she only knew me by my scent as Chainsaw Man and not actually as Denji, then he could have had a chance. And that is when Denji comes to the realization that she never saw me even once from the start, which is pretty heartbreaking. Like, she wasn't looking at Denji as him. She was looking at him as this huge, monstrous, powerful demon called the Chainsaw Man. When at heart, even though Denji had made this transformation, even though he was kind of losing his humanity, he was still Denji, and he was still a guy that wanted affection, that wanted to be loved. And that's real right there, because we don't always see that in shonen series. Like, yes, we see the character overcoming obstacles in life, but when do we really see a character really deal with this insecurity? Because this was something that Denji has always had. This was something that wasn't exactly solved towards the end of the series, as far as this insecurity of wanting to just be loved, wanting to have affection. Because obviously, we don't really see about the relationship between him and his mother, but obviously he cared about his mother. But there's kind of no telling what the relationship between him and his mother was actually like. It could have been a relationship whereby, yes, he did love his mother, but was it a good relationship between, his mother and himself? And towards the end of the series, we find out that Denji had killed his father. So, yeah, it's not really looking too good for him as far as like the family aspect and him living a pretty much like a functional life. And even though we see that he did change as a result of his heart turning into like a demon heart, we kind of get the feeling that Denji was always going to be sort of like this dysfunctional character, because how could anyone be functional living a life like the way that how he's lived it, and also having the type of childhood that he had? It's almost impossible. But possibly the most horrifying fact about Makima and her manipulation is the fact that when Denji finally finds a family in the form of Aki and power, she's always there to manipulate it and ruin it for her own ends, even to the point that Denji has to put Aki down when Aki is possessed by the gun demon, in part due to Makima meddling in some certain things and, being the tactician that she is. She doesn't want Denji to find any happiness in other people besides herself. And to be honest, her manipulation is just outstanding when it comes to just how she takes away happiness. I know I just said this before just a few minutes ago, but when we think about his battle between himself and the bomb demon Rez, where he's able to save her life and try to convince her to just do things a little bit differently, because she's just like him. She's a person that had her heart replaced by a demon, so she's still somewhat human. And all she's known throughout her whole entire life is being used by people and being used as a weapon. So when Denji is trying to give her something different in life, when he says, hey, look, like after this, why don't you just run away with me? Like, why don't you try to live a life that's different than what you're doing? And it seems to be as though like she's thinking about it. And there's this very like sad scene where she looks to be meeting Denji at like a diner where he first met her. But unfortunately, things don't go too well for her. That plan is quickly found out by Makima, who orchestrates a plan to kill her. And the last thought that she ever has about Denji is that she's never going to school either, indicating that, both of them, they had some similarities. They never really had a normal life. Both of them didn't really have the best cards dealt to them in life, and they wanted something different. And she possibly was going towards that path of being a different person and making a better life for herself. And Denji was a very important part of that. And maybe she had some sort of connection to Denji, although definitely, yeah, she did set him up to die, and she did almost kill him like several times. And I'm not going to sit here and act like she's just this innocent character or this innocent girl, but we can definitely see how a part of her childhood and the life that she has lived has played a tremendous role in how things had turned out for this character. And we really see that, again, guys, every time that Denji gets some sort of happiness in his life, every single time, it's just taken away from him. And it just goes back to his origin story, that when he does get some sort of hope, when he does get some sort of light, things just happen to him that's pretty horrible. However, I do like Denji's attitude throughout the whole thing, but it just seems like he's just numb to it after a while. Like, even when he's sitting at the diner holding the flowers for Rez, it kind of just sits in that he knows that she died. And it's just he's come to accept these things as just a part of his life, that he doesn't necessarily get so angry at it. Like, we definitely see Denji have his angry moments, but we never just see him just break down and just go insane from all this tremendous amount of trauma that has happened to this character throughout this series. Because again, guys, he's used to this, he's numb to it, and it just relates to real life. You may know some people, and even your own family or friends, that have just been through tremendous, horrible circumstances, and because it happens to them so much, after a while, they just get used to it. But that's not to say that Denji, he's not a man of feelings or some type of attachment, because again, guys, he does grow sort of attached to Aki, and they kind of grow this kind of like brotherly relationship where he knows that Aki has been through a lot, and he is a man of deep convictions, and Denji doesn't shy away from joking around with Aki, and they kind of have this very cool relationship where they seem like they hate each other, but they really don't. And he's sort of like, again, guys, like that big brother to Denji, trying to show him the ropes. And even from the beginning of the series, when they first meet each other, Aki kind of punches Denji in the stomach, and they're like fighting and stuff like that. And the reason why Aki does this is not just to be a jerk, but to see if he really has the conviction to be a demon hunter, because he's known so many people that has died through this line of work. And we actually see this with one of his friends in the series, where she unfortunately meets her gruesome end as well. But no, the trauma doesn't end for Denji just yet, even towards the end of the series, even when the one character I think that would actually make it to the end dies, and that is his wonderful best friend, Power. And I would just like to say that this is probably the best relationship throughout this whole entire series. Like, hands down, their relationship is the most well developed. It's pretty quirky at best, and they start off on horrible terms. We kind of see that Power, she's very different than other demons. She still looks at humans as pretty much just less than, and that's mostly because the way in which she actually possessed this human body was through the head and not through the heart. So any time that a demon possesses a human through the head, they are called devil men, and they essentially retain their whole entire demonic personality without the human personality side as well. So basically, she pretty much just stole this girl's body. But it's kind of weird how their relationship really starts. And it's not as though it's like a complete romantic relationship, although you can definitely see that as well. It's kind of weird. It's in that middle where you're not really sure what to call. Is it platonic or is it romantic? And you're kind of wondering why he holds these feelings for Makima and not for Power. And this relationship starts off pretty odd. First of all, Power cares a lot about this cat. However, this cat was being held hostage by the bad demon, and she tricks Denji into going to the bad demon's hideout in order for her to negotiate the release of this cat. The bad demon eats her and the cat. However, Denji almost dies saving Power. He slices this bad demon in half and is able to save Power along with her cat. And that is when we kind of get the scene where Power, she starts to realize that maybe her original instincts as a demon is wrong. Maybe she needs to start trusting people and just acting different. And through the course of the manga, we really see their relationship really start to develop into a pretty awesome one, and a one that we really see Power caring about Denji and vice versa as well. And at the end, where we see Power's last moments before her death, she brings a birthday cake for Denji, indicating that, look, like, she really likes this dude. Like, not necessarily romantically, but who knows. And of course, we all remember that scene. I believe it was in chapter 96, where Power, she comes back from the dead to save Denji. And Denji's actually really sad about it because it's like, yo, like, I miss you. Like, why'd you have to die? Like, don't leave me. What's going on? And she gives Denji the last amount of power that he needs to just survive. And that is when we see the last of power. And this was so sad to me, guys. Like, honestly, this relationship was way more developed than most relationships that I've seen, even in shonen series. It's way more developed than Naruto and Hinata. And Naruto fans, don't come for me. You know that relationship is not that tough, and you know it's not very well developed. Of course, you guys can say, well, it's not a romance series. And yes, I do agree with you. However, does it really make any sense that Denji in Power is more developed than Naruto and Hinata? Like, seriously. This manga's only been here for like 97 chapters, but already they have way more development than Naruto and Hinata. I'm just saying, like, let's just go figure right here. But just the weird part about all of this is that even when they have this buildup for this awesome relationship, and the relationship that Denji has with Power is just the strongest, and when he sees that Makima killed her, there's just no reaction here. He's just so timid. He's just, maybe because he's so much in a daze about what happened, but he's just taking it and just like, oh, okay. When Makima tells him, like, yo, like, open that door, she's gonna die. Like, I'm gonna kill her. And it's just really sad here. Like, Denji really becomes a simp. And that's the one main issue that I have throughout this series is that I'm gonna have to be honest here. Like, Denji, he is definitely a simp throughout this whole series from Makima. And he doesn't even realize that he's being manipulated to just this extent throughout the whole series. And yeah, I know that we just saw this scene right here where even after Power's death, Denji's just, he's so in a daze. He doesn't really know what happened. He's just like shocked. And the one thing that I would say that I love about Denji's character is that he doesn't stay completely a simp forever. He doesn't stay a simp. Like, he literally turns from simp to a pimp, and he pimps slap Makima with his chainsaw, finally killing her and ending her reign of terror. And that is what I love to see from Denji, is that when it came time to do what he had to do, he did what needed to be asked of him to save the world. Otherwise, Makima, which is the control demon, would have just literally killed him and controlled the world. That girl got some issues. However, at the end of the series, there's still some type of troubling aspect to Denji's character. Still that insecurity that he actually loves her. It's like kind of crazy. Like, I don't know if it's love or it's just he doesn't maybe feel good about himself. I don't know what it is. But even towards the end, when our boy Denji finally eats Makima, he states to himself, so that is how you taste, Miss Makima. And that is when the final scene, our boy Denji, you know, he sees this demon and he does his little chainsaw thing. And that is the end of part one. I have to say, I really love this series. It brought something very new, I think, to the Shonen Jump series as far as like realism. And this is a new trend in Shonen Jump series, is that we're starting to see more developed and complicated main characters in the Shonen Jump, such as Tanjiro and even to some extent Deku. Deku has his issues. Asta, he's probably going to become complicated in the future as well, but Denji really takes the cake for a realistic hero that has his own issues that needed to be solved. And even towards the end of the series, his issues didn't exactly, you know, get solved as far as these insecurities and his needing or wanting to just be loved. But those are my thoughts about this series, and I hope you guys liked it. And if you did, subscribe to my channel. Also comment down below and tell me what you guys loved about this video. This was probably like my longest video to date because there's so much that I love about this series and just so many different aspects that I thought was pretty wonderful about it. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And as always, make sure you stay safe out there, and peace.